Mwai Kibaki. And it is the same time we had very revolutionary expenditure lines like basic education funding and all the others that even beyond being good in terms of growth of the economy, they also are social investments because they enhance an egalitarian society. All of us here in this hall, I can bet over 80% will not be in this hall were it not for the reforms around education during that time or regime of President Mwai Kibaki. Why am I talking about that in this kind of sternness? We are now talking about 10 trillion to 11 trillion depending on where the currency is, because 50% is denominated by a currency, not other currencies, not ours. Now, if you check our debt to GDP levels, and I want to agree with Bernard, this is what happens when you are making a budget. You have to address the issues in your country, but I have also seen we are not as sovereign as we purport to be. Developing countries are not as sovereign as it appears. Because when you are doing revenue raising measures, for example, some of those things are conditions from people you want to borrow money from. Without mentioning the exact ones, I can see in your faces you already know them. So, are we together? Ama nipuguza hii maneno ya economics ya kiasi. I'm looking for words for you to capture this point properly. I'm talking about debt. If you look at our debt level, 10 to 11 trillion, and I'm trying to solidify the point that was said earlier, you'll be given a condition about debt to GDP ratio. You'll also be given a condition around fiscal deficit to GDP ratio. If you notice there, GDP is cutting across both two parameters. So what do authorities do? Because the target is on a percentage. If I do 2 out of 10, 2 out of 10 is what? 2 over 10 is 20. 2 over 10. 2 divided by 10. What's that? 20%. Very well. What about when I do 2 out of 20? 10%. What have I changed? Have I changed? Is the 2 constant? What have I changed? What if my obligation was to lower the percentage? What do I need to do around the denominator? Now, ask yourself this. You report in the same government documents, the Kenyan GDP grew by 4.something%. That goes in the record. The same record shows the GDP moved from 16 trillion to 18 trillion. What is that percent? Can somebody do 16 out of 18? I mean, to do the math. When GDP moves from 16 to 18, what percentage is that? That is 2 out of 16. 12.5. Okay, they will argue one is real, the other one is nominal. You can even discount inflation out of it. So I want you to see, so that even as you work around the figures you work on as IPF and also the fourth estate, you are able to get the reality by yourself. Because if the economy has grown by 10%, then it should reflect also on the GDP side, which you calculate in, or you used to calculate the other parameters, but should also be the one reported by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics and all the other government bodies. I hope I'm making sense. You don't need anyone to tell you the economy of Kenya grew by what percent. you can calculate it by yourself in nominal terms and in real terms, because you have all the parameters from public institutions. So the problem around our debt is that when we inflate our denominator, we continue to show like the economy grew with the purpose of having a leg room of borrowing more. The problem is that you cannot teach figures for too long. It catches up with you, and especially when it is time for repayment. Debt management is everything else. It catches you around repayment. Now, we are spending over 1 trillion Kenya shillings in paying our interest rates. Over 1 trillion Kenya shillings. Now, whether you inflate GDP or you condense it, that is actual money that actually have to be paid. That is where it catches you. Because you may come and say, you know, our fiscal deficit to GDP ratio is 5% or the next, or the other figure. That's fine, it goes to the books. It will catch up with you when it's time for repayment. The other things I want you to, I'm just provoking your mind so that you go research further. I saw headlines in our newspapers the other day in jubilation that we have done a very good thing, because in that year of 20, I think last year or thereabout, we were able to repay our Eurobond. And the people in this hall, because I can see you are able to dig deeper. You talk about in jubilation of having been able to pay the Eurobond of 2014. And it comes out as headline as a jubilation for the country. Now this is the reality. The reality is that you retire a debt of 6.8% with a debt of 10.3%. And then you clap and you want the whole country to be closed for people to celebrate. I'm provoking all of us here. I mean, Kenya is for all of us, and we need to speak these things as clearly as they ought. You cannot go and take a loan from Shylock, you pay a bank, and then you go home, and people should celebrate you for taking a loan with an interest of 20% to pay the one you had that you are paying 12%. Those are the things that will catch up with this country very soon. And by the way, with all honesty, if we do not become more prudent in the several months to come, we are likely to have a very big problem with our debt. Why? If in our revenue collection, over 40% is going into interest rate alone of debt obligations, what are we talking about? The other thing I want us to reflect on around debt, and the reason why this, and I'm challenging even those who are responsible in government to speak about it clearly, because part of this communication is important. You collect revenues of around 2.4 trillion shillings. You use over 1.2 trillion in paying interest rates of debt incurred. So that's 50% that you can do nothing about. Basically what we are doing as a country, the money we are borrowing in terms of PFM Act, you should be borrowing for development alone. But even by doing the math, even with a pencil, if we take our revenue collection, you remove CFS, you remove salaries, you're already in red. It means the money we borrow, some of it is for budget support, and clearly that money is for recurrent. You don't need to go very far. Just this data, just do the math around this data, even with a pencil, you'll get the correct figure. So this issue of debt, if we are not progressive enough and prudent enough as a country, in just a few months to come, we will see the ramifications. We do not want Kenya to be a case study like Sri Lanka in the year 2002, in the year 2022, 2023. The primary reason was debt. The issue around Zambia never decided too much because there was a new president who had to tell their country as it is, and they restructured, or they started or attempted to restructure. Ghana never had that luxury. They actually defaulted. Now, if you receive 2 shillings and 1 shilling is already going into interest rates of debt incurred in terms of interest rate, and the other shilling remaining cannot pay even the recurrent expenditure, I mean, there is work to be done there. And I'm saying it so that we provoke our mind, we think, not with the aim of just talking, but also providing a solution to it. Therefore, you must have seen sometime last week, I saw the National Treasury had put up some communication which was recanted very fast about a visit to China. Visits to China currently or other bilaterals, I can assure you, will be about debt primarily. Because we are almost at a cliff in terms of debt repayment, and especially interest rate. The problem is that when you go to your creditors to discuss about either rescheduling debt or working around new terms, what are you telling the markets? When I am here, I have borrowed 3 of you some money, 10,000, 12,000, 18,000. I have your money now, so you expect me to pay you. You see, as my sister there, I've already called my brother here to tell him, you know, I was to pay you this money, but forgive me, you may have to add me a few more months for me to pay you this money. What am I already telling you? As the other person, I owe money. I've already called you as a person who owes you money. I mean, najaribu kuodoa economy kwa hii maneno mingi. Martin is here. Dirango is there. And Veronica. I owe, all of you have lent me money. Veronica 12,000, Dirango 10, and Martin 18,000. Yani, mumenikopesha. Munaelewa hiyo maneno? Niko hapa. Martin ako hapa, ameona nimeita Dirango. Nimemwambia, najua niko na pesa yako na nilikuwa nikulipe next month. Lakini sasa nataka tuongee. What comes to your mind as Veronica? Are you getting what I'm trying to say? Any talk you start around debt, changing terms, you already communicate to the markets. If you look at the figures, the yield of our Kenyan Eurobond, even as late as yesterday, you see changes there. Because markets operate on credible and fundamental information. When the market starts sensing that somebody owes you money, you're already talking to them, not asking them which bank account they should pay you through, but asking you, can we, tunaweza fanya, unipe miezi kidogo, kiasi nini. When they start seeing you already giving signals to one of your creditors that you want changes in terms, you are already communicating signals to the market. And those signals in the market is actually how countries then decide. Because what usually happens, when you give signals that you have problems with paying debt, the international market starts to sense you as somebody who may also change terms when they lend you money. So what do? They already input that risk in the interest rate they will charge you. That is why you see the yield of our Kenyan Eurobond is changing. Because when the